A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
The very first night getting her out, we just knew it was bad. I mean, she just didn't act right, the very first night. If you just look at the timeline just briefly, her daughter's supposedly missing for 31 days. Then she's in custody for 30 days. So she has no contact of looking for her child or where the searches are going on or where anything's happening. And so the second she gets out and we get her home, you would think she would be in her parents' arms, what's going on, where you at, what are the tips? And it was just nothing. She could care less about her child. Actually, back in 1985, Chevy Wheeler went missing. Chevy Wheeler was last seen getting into Shermantine's truck. He was 18, she was 16. She was going to skip school, and witnesses saw her get into his truck, take off. Later, they interviewed her friends and said that she was going to skip school that day, hang out with him up at his family property up in San Andreas, and she never came back. So this is back in 85. And again, unbeknownst to me at the time, they investigated. He was the only suspect. They actually gathered some blood in the cabin up in San Andreas.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast. This week, we are excited to have Rob Dick on the show. Rob is a bounty hunter with over 30 years of law enforcement experience behind him. Rob has become passionate about missing victims, and he is doing work that is very similar to what Laura does. It's actually quite extraordinary to see them work together.
Rob has an impressive resume working on high-profile cases, such as the Casey Anthony one and the Speed Freak Killer case, among others.
The Speed Freak Killer case is terrifying. Wesley Shermantine and Lauren Herzog were best friends who grew up in the San Joaquin Valley in California. The deadly duo shared an apartment after high school and got hooked on meth and murder. They later became known as the Speed Freak Killers.
In 1999, they were arrested for the possible murder of two teenage girls who were missing, Chevy Wheeler and Cindy Vanderheiden. During a 17-hour police interrogation, Herzog flipped on his best friend Shermantine, blaming him for the murders.
Shermantine was charged with first-degree murder of Chevy Wheeler, Cindy Vanderheiden, Paul Cavanaugh, and Howard King. He was sentenced to death row in San Quentin State Prison.
Herzog was found guilty of first-degree murder of Cindy Vanderheiden, Howard King, and Paul Cavanaugh, and he was given a 78-year sentence.
Herzog claimed that he was wrongfully convicted and that he was coerced by police to confess. He was out on parole by September 2010.
In 2011, Shermantine offered to draw a map of where the victims were located for law enforcement, and a few weeks later, Herzog killed himself.
In 2012, Rob was working with bounty hunter Leonard Padilla when Shermantine gave them a map of where the remains were located. Police were led to a boneyard where they found over 1,000 human bone fragments, and they were able to locate the remains of 5 victims. Shermantine claims that there are over 70 more victims still out there.
Laura and Rob met on San Quentin's death row, and they both share the same drive to extract information to recover missing victims. Okay, so today on the podcast, we have another special guest, Rob Dick. We met him when we were up at San Quentin this past weekend, and he was doing his visitation with a serial killer that he's been working with, Wesley Shermantine, and he's been working with him for years now. And so, Rob, thanks for being on the podcast. We have Laura here, too. We have Cindy. Why don't you start off, Rob? We always want to get a little bit of background on you for our audience. So just give us a little bit of a bio on yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing and what you do. I mean, you're a private detective, but you're also a bounty hunter as well, correct?
Correct. I started off as a deputy sheriff right out of high school with SAC sheriff, and then went into bounty hunting, kind of tired of working at the jail and wanted to just be out and go chase bad guys. So started bounty hunting with Leonard Padilla, worked with him for numerous years. which kind of got all over the country, all over the world, chasing people. Never know where they're going to go where they're at to pick them up. Along the way, got my PI license, and I didn't really do a lot of PI stuff as far as like spousal checks or following anybody, but kind of always liked investigations and cold cases, things like that. And it kind of graduated from that into investigations. Still do bounty hunting, but my passion's really on kind of the cold cases and getting involved with working with Leonard. Got into several kind of high profile cases, and that kind of piqued my interest as well.
What are some of the high profile cases you worked on?
Well, first Casey Anthony case back in Florida. Leonard had a way of trying to kind of get in the middle of things, so he came up with the idea that we should bail her out originally and get her out of jail, and she kept saying that she would help find her child if she was out. So ended up bailing her out, and then as part of the terms and condition of the bail bond, I would have to bodyguard her and basically be with her all the time, which then put me in the house and around her and dealing with all that chaos that continues to go on with that case.
That must have been an experience. It's such a high-profile case. Was that the first big one that you worked on that was really in the media?
Yeah, that was the major one. I mean, there was like Ellie Nestler. I wasn't involved. I was Leonard before, but I was involved with when her son ended up committing murder years later. And we basically talked him into the office and got him put into custody kind of safely without him or anybody else getting hurt. But the biggest, probably worldwide one was the Casey Anthony. And I don't think getting into the Casey Anthony case, we had any idea how big or bad that case would end up being. I think it was more of a daughter was supposedly missing. We'll get her out and we'll just figure it out. We actually had been involved in something like that here locally years before that, where the parents were arrested for a missing child, and they murdered the child, and it kind of blew up. But it didn't get the attention as that one did, and I just don't think that was as far as on the radar as how big that went. But yeah, that was just chaos the entire time. I don't think I've ever been experienced anything like that one.
So after Casey Anthony was out...
Well, hold on. Before you do that, I got to ask this question. All right. What was she like, and what did you think happened?
Well, I think the people watching it on TV and just seeing the whole thing didn't realize that she's definitely got some issues. You don't get that in just a news clip or something. But, we went in with an open mind thinking that, okay, maybe she's got the child somewhere. She's just making this big old story up. That's why she's not showing any emotion. And, she thinks she's safe, so that's why she's acting like that. Something along those lines of just not wanting to think the worst. And the very first night getting her out, we just knew it was bad. I mean, she just didn't act right. The very first night, if you just look at the timeline just briefly, her daughter's supposedly missing for 31 days. Then she's in custody for 30 days. So she has no contact of looking for her child or where the searches are going on or where anything's happening. And so the second she gets out and we get her home, you would think she would be in her parents' arms, what's going on, where you at, what are the tips? And it was just nothing. She could care less about her child. And immediately right then it was just kind of like, crap, what did we get into? This is all bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just, and it just got worse from then on.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, and it's still going on. It's still going on, as you said. All right.
Why do you think it's still going on?
I think the chaos to it is that, nobody, I think, ever believed she was going to walk from the trial. I mean, there was so much evidence that they could get a conviction. I think it was just like the perfect storm of mess ups. You had the prosecutor he was pushing the death penalty for a murder with duct tape, yet couldn't answer the questions of how she died, when she died. There was no way to prove the duct tape was the murder weapon. I mean, it was just, you could link everything together and say, well, there was only one person involved and she was only with her mother, and whatever happened, we know the end result, and it had to be from her. But it wasn't presented that way, and I think it was confusing. And her attorney Baez did a good enough job with throwing out that reasonable doubt. That's why it's been such a chaotic mess ever since, is because since she got off, she waited 15 years to do her, what I call a mockumentary now, that basically she just throws everybody under the bus. Like, it's poor me, I'm the victim, poor me, my dad abused me, everybody abused me. And then, of course, the family's got to live with that and defend that.
I know recently they did this documentary where they put the parents on polygraph. Did Casey Anthony, I can't remember, did she ever take a polygraph?
No, and she's been spiraling. I mean, her and I argue all the time on Twitter and stuff. It's kind of funny. because she knows I know things that she can't really just throw out there, the BS. And she's been spiraling because, she had done her mockumentary, put all this BS out that even contradicts itself within the own show. And then George and Cindy have been just going through it. The parents, basically, he's been accused of being a child molester, and he couldn't go anywhere. He goes to the store, people are looking at him, because that's a hard shadow to get off you once you're accused of that. So then they came out in response and did that public lie detector test, totally exonerated, disproved everything she said. She's never done it. At the same time, while they're throwing out the previews for it, she's online saying that, she just got paid $500,000 to do hers, and then couldn't even go a day, because we knew that wasn't true, but couldn't even go a day within posting, forget that, I don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Yeah, she's pathological, it sounds like.
Was she ever diagnosed with anything, do you know?
Well, the only people that really did anything were the paid experts for the defense. And of course, they were actually even going down that road for a possible insanity plea at one point. And then it came out that, she may or may not have been abused. She seems okay. But you could just tell she's not. She's pathological. She lies all the time. She's narcissistic. You can just see it if you're around her for 5 minutes. It's all about her.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting. It's interesting you got your feet wet with that crazy case. So tell us, Laura, tell us how you guys met up and how you guys connected.
Well, we met through a serial killer that he interviews off of San Quentin's death row. I had just moved to Los Angeles, and I was, doing my PI hours to get my hours up to get my California license, and he had told me you should talk to my PI, and he gave me Rob's number, and I called him.
And that was Wesley Shermantine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's backtrack here. So, Rob, how did you get involved with Wesley Shermantine, and why did you get involved with him? Because I think it's really important to understand the motivation, which is very similar to Laura's motivation in talking to these serial killers in order to get information about these victims.
And if you can provide a little context for the audience on who Wesley Shermantine is. We all know who he is, but I'm not sure all our audience members. Just kind of give us a quick thumbnail sketch of who he is and what he did.
Yeah, so how I started was in 1998. Cindy Vanderheiden went missing out of Clements, California. And she was, kind of a in the news case. We're talking about back in 98, there wasn't 147 channels. It was just the 4. It was kind of big news that someone went missing. I just went out to help look for any clues or anything. The community had all kind of poured out to walk the field and walk the cemetery where a car was located. And, again, it's not, back in 98, it wasn't all the true crime shows and all the talk about, people missing all the time. So in my mind, it was probably simple, in 98, I was bounty hunting, chasing people that didn't want to be found, and we found everybody. So it's like, yeah, it's no big deal. We'll find her. We'll figure it out. She probably partied a little hard and she's at somebody's house or something. So I met John, her dad, and Terry, her mom, and her other sister, Kim, and kind of became friends with them, and just kind of got to see firsthand, being around them, of just the pain that I'd never been exposed to of someone missing in a family, and the unknown questions and the things that the family just can't go on without that closure. So it just kind of really intrigued me. At the time, I didn't know that law enforcement was already looking at 2 individuals, Lauren Herzog and Wesley Shermantine. Part of the reason they had been looking at them is because actually back in 1985, Chevy Wheeler went missing. Chevy Wheeler was last seen getting into Shermantine's truck. He was 18, she was 16. She was going to skip school, and witnesses saw her get into his truck, take off. And later they interviewed her friends and said that she was going to skip school that day, hang out with him up at his family property up in San Andreas, and she never came back. So this is back in 85. And again, unbeknownst to me at the time, they investigated. He was the only suspect. They actually gathered some blood in the cabin up in San Andreas. But it's 85. It's before DNA was really being used in law enforcement. They had no way to figure it out. Shermantine's statement was it was a hunting cabin. So yeah, of course there's blood in there. There's all kinds of animal blood in there. And it just kind of sat on the shelf as a cold case. They never really could figure out if it was human or if it was some of Chevy's or anything. So then fast forward to 98, Cindy's in the bar talking to Wes and his friend Lauren. And Lauren and Wes had been in kind of the drug scene, and they were partying, if you will, at the bar. And witnesses said that there might be some kind of connection, that maybe they were going to meet up or something, which kind of law enforcement to them, because now they've got Shermantine connected to possibly two missing women. And then just to kind of wrap up this long story real quick, beginning of 99, February of 99, the Yosemite three go missing, which is a case of the mother, the daughter, and the foreign exchange student. That's a pretty high profile case. They are actually looking at West Lauren for that as well, because now potentially they have 5 women missing. What kind of broke the case was a repo guy repoed Shermantine's car. They're in the news as persons of interest at the time. They then, the repo guy contacts San Joaquin Sheriff's Department and says, hey, I got the guy's car. It's in the news as a person of interest in the Yosemite. Do you want the car? So they grab the car. Of course, now we're in 99. DNA is being well used in law enforcement. They find some blood in Shermantine's car, DNA at Cindy's blood. They pull the blood from the cabin, DNA it, they got Chevy's blood. So they basically have him dead to rights with blood of both victims coming back to something of his. So they grab Lauren first because Lauren is best friend. Like, these guys grew up across the street neighbors at age 4, never separated after that. They grew up together, they lived together, they eventually even got married and lived together with their wives. I mean, it's just, they were always together. So they grab Lauren first, take him in, and Lauren basically just breaks down, just talking about all the bodies, all the murders. And in that interview, he basically gives the details of only someone that would have been there, of Chevy's murder, an unsolved homicide of a Native American up on Highway 88, unsolved homicide of 2 males at the end of Daggett Road, a unsolved homicide of a female who was stabbed 46 times, left naked in the field, and a hunter in Utah that was killed. And detectives are just kind of blown away because they really were just going there to talk to him about Cindy being missing. So based off his statements and things that only someone being there would know, they take him into custody, go out and grab Shermantine. Shermantine, his basic statement is, I didn't kill anybody. Lauren did it all. So whatever he said, I'll tell you details. It'll show I was there, but I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then March 18, 1999, they're both in custody for, at the time, they're looking at them for Cindy, Chevy, the male on Highway 88, the 2 males on Daggett Road, and the hunter in Utah, and the female that's left in the field. So that's all they got on them at the moment. And then, of course, by June, the Yosemite case goes a different direction with Cary Stayner. Cary Stayner kills park ranger, and they figure out that's him, and then they get him into custody, and he admits to the Yosemite killing.
So how many?
It's just
how many people? Okay,
So wait, so the Yosemite killer, Cary Stayner, he was then responsible for those 3 women that were killed in Yosemite, not the Speed Freak killers, the Wesley Shermantine and Lauren.
Correct. They had no idea about Cary Stayner at the time. Cary Stayner was actually the motel maintenance guy where they were taken from. They were actually looking at 2 groups, Shermantine and Lauren, and another group of bad guys in that area, and trying to put the case together. Cary Stayner ends up raping and killing Joey Armstrong, who's a park ranger staying in a cabin on the grounds of Yosemite, and somebody sees his international scout, and they figure out that he's the one that did that. He actually flees because he was actually staying around the motel during the investigation, helping the FBI, let him into rooms and everything. And then the rape and murder happens on the other girl, the park ranger, so he flees, and somebody sees him on the news in Elk Grove at a nudist colony, at a nudist colony, and so they take him into custody. And then while in custody, he admits to the Yosemite killings, the 3 women. And we do know he's involved because for sure he led law enforcement to the daughter, which was the one that he had. It's just to me, it's just kind of questionable because the other 2, and I know this is going to cause a lot of headache, probably people calling in on this, but mom and foreign exchange student were killed a different way, put in the trunk. Car was out in the woods, set on fire, and he definitely had the daughter because the daughter was killed the same way as Joey the park ranger was.
All right, so in total, what was Shermantine? What were they? How many do you think they killed, or how many did he get convicted for?
So at that time, we only knew of the ones that he spoke of. They'd taken the Yosemite 3 away. So the actual conviction was Shermantine got sentenced to death twice, once for Cindy Vanderheiden and once for Chevy Wheeler. The other guys, so there's 3 guys and 1 girl. We're not talking about the out-of-state because that's out-of-state, but 3 guys and the female, he was just basically listed as an accessory because they didn't really know what the involvement was. There wasn't much evidence on these cases. It's just that based off of Lauren's statements, they definitely had to be there. Obviously, they probably were the only ones there, but they had to be there. There was too many details in the statement that there was no way anybody would have got that. There was hold back by law enforcement. It wasn't put out publicly.
Now, when you say there was more than just Sherman Time and Herzog?
No, I'm saying that Lauren gave statements of him and Sherman being there. His version is Sherman committed the murders.
Got it.
Sherman version is, yeah, I was there, but Lauren did it all.
Got it. It wasn't me, it was him. They were both pointing at each other.
Right. They're pointing fingers at each other, but, it's things like where, Lauren's version of the Daggett Road murders are they come upon two guys at the end of dead-end road. It's Wes's idea, supposedly, that they want to rob these guys. They always have their shotguns. They decide to get out. Lauren's version is Wes goes up to the driver's side, unloads 2 rounds in the guy's face, comes back and takes Lauren's shotgun, and then goes to the passenger side and shoots him twice in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure that could happen that way, but okay.
Yeah.
But that's his version.
Got it.
So, like I say, they charge them both on all of these. So Wes gets the 2 death sentences and then an accessory on the rest of them. Lauren only gets an accessory where he gets charged as an accessory based off his statements, and he gets 78 years to life.
Yeah.
So,
but then there was something crazy that we read about that he was paroled and the appeals court threw out his conviction. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So basically, the details of that is when they take Lauren in for his investigation, or they're investigating, him and Wes. They take him in for his interrogation. I mean, they're talking to him, and he's just talking about like, oh my gosh, all these murders, all these bodies. I'm so glad it's over with. And they don't know what he's talking about. And they're like, well, just wait a minute. Let's just talk about Cindy. We're here to talk about Cindy. And so he gives the whole details of Cindy and how she was murdered. According to him, it was all Wes. He raped her, murdered her, slit her throat, let her bleed out. And he just happened to be there with them, didn't do anything, wraps her in the blanket, both of them, and then they put her in the trunk, and that's all he knows. Afterwards, he made a statement, something to the effect of, man, this is pretty heavy, I should probably talk to somebody, maybe a lawyer or something. I said, well, just a minute, what about these other bodies? And then he lays out the rest of the murders. So when he appeals it, based off Miranda, he didn't Mirandize quick enough, everything's thrown out on Lauren.
Wow.
And the only thing now they have is him witnessing Cindy's murder. So this was in 2004. So in 2004, Lauren was going to walk free from prison. So the DA, Thomas Testa, made a deal with him and said, hey, look, you take a manslaughter deal for 14 years right now, and I won't retry you for murder and send you to death row with your buddy Wes. And Lauren, I think, just wasn't the brightest of the two, and instead of 78 years to life, 14 sounds better, so he said, I'll take the 14, please. So he went back to Susanville. Otherwise, if he'd have just said, hey, prove it, he probably wouldn't have got him on Cindy's murder, and he would have walked back in 2004. So then now that's what happened is it put him to get out in 2010 based off of his prior in custody time. First time served. So eventually, he gets paroled in 2010.
And Wesley Sherman did not. He went away to death row.
Yeah, he went to death row back in 2001 during the conviction. Yeah, he goes to death row.
And then remind us again when you started speaking with Sherman. What year?
Well, we should have talked about something before.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to know how you ended up talking to Sherman. Like what motivated you to?
Well, no, I'm saying before we were recording, we should have said something. There's something I don't want to get out there yet, though.
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
This is not live.
This is not live, so we can edit it out.
Okay. Well, just so you understand,
okay.
Got it.
Okay, well, we don't need to say that.
We won't put that in there.
No, what we're more interested in is why you ended up reaching out to him.
Yeah,
and
we don't need your tactics.
Yeah, we just want to know, I want to reiterate the work that you guys are doing so that people understand.
So why don't we back up and ask that question again, Sin?
So what motivated you to start talking to Wesley Sherman? Like, after the case was closed, the case is closed, right? He goes to death row, and so law enforcement just closes the case and they don't continue on looking for missing victims.
Yeah, so for me, I guess what kind of made me pursue this and the drive, I guess, was even though they were convicted in 2001, Cindy was never found. And I was still spending time with the family on the weekends, going out and trying to find Cindy, basically, finding clues. Usually when someone goes missing, the family sets up some kind of a foundation or something, a tip line or something. Her dad set up Cindy Search and had a tip line. And so he was getting tips along with, law enforcement still kind of getting tips, but after their sentence, it's pretty much done. I mean, it was kind of even though I'd been in law enforcement been around the bail side, the law enforcement side, even worked in jails. I never really understood that there's a point where law enforcement kind of stops. And I'm not saying anything bad. I'm still, very pro law enforcement. But in 2001, just a real quick side story to this, I was at victim impact statements just before Wes got sentenced to death. And while I'm out there, I met a woman who was also going to the trial like I was, like the families were, just, an interested party. So I met her and we're talking, and she says, the reason I'm here is because I have a feeling they killed my daughter too. And I said, really? And I said, what's the story? And so she tells me the story that this girl's a friend of Chevy's, lived around the corner from Chevy. Back in 85 when Chevy went missing, she also went missing. So she calls law enforcement. Law enforcement comes out, runs her, and finds out that she was a runaway previously. She had run away. So they basically took a runaway report. And that was it. This is 1985. Nobody did a thing after that. It's just, she ran away. I'll do a little one-page report and put her in the system, and she'll be back. Now, fast forward to 2001 when we're going to the trial. Her mom's there. She's never been back. She never came back. No one's ever seen her. So that kind of intrigued me, too, and I was thinking that there might be more to this. I mean, serial killers don't just stop. We got basically a confession to 6 victims in the 80s, mid-80s, and then stop doing anything until 1998 when Cindy goes missing? There's no way. There's got to be way more victims than this. So I think that was my intrigue initially, and I stayed with it. And then part of the drive was, I think, just trying to get Cindy back to her parents. She's deceased, but we want to bring those remains home, give that closure. I just didn't want to give up on that. So I'm doing kind of 2 things. I'm trying to find other cases that might be connected to these guys. I'm looking things up, as well as helping the family. We're following up leads. I talked to Testa, the DA. He says, yeah, it sucks because technically we're done. We're not going to do anything. Now, I just want to go back to that victim impact statement because I got ahead of myself. The day of the victim impact statements, of course, the Cindy's parents and Chevy's parents are there to make their comments against Wes. Then Wes is going to give his little version of the trial and how everybody was against him, whatever. Joanne's mom's there. That's the other missing girl. She wants to make a statement. So his attorneys object and they don't let her talk. Cindy's parents do theirs. Chevy's parents do theirs. And then it's Wes's turn. He's sitting up in the box and he's just rambling, and the jury got it wrong. It should be Lauren that should be on death row. He's guilty of nothing other than being a good friend, and just on and on. It's ranting and raving. And he stops and he looks at Joan in the audience and he turns to her and he says, Miss Hobson, I don't know you, but I will tell you your daughter's dead. She's in the boneyard with the rest of the bodies.
Wow. So he confirmed it right there for the woman.
Yeah, the whole courtroom erupts. She's crying, she's screaming.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's just, she knew all along, but now to be told by one of them. I go to the DA afterwards and I said, so what are we doing now? And he's like, what do you mean? Nothing. I said, what are you talking about? Spontaneous statement in open court by one of the suspects about a murder? We got a murder trial. We got to do something for her. And he just kind of looked. He goes, yeah, that's not enough to run a murder trial. We got no body. We have no confirmation. We have no scene. We got nothing. Yeah, I agree. He probably killed her, but unless we find something, we're not going to look. But I'm just saying, if something comes up, sure, we'll do something then. But we're done now. And I mean, I get it. I get the fact from a professional standpoint. We have these horrible crimes. We have victims. They put 2 very bad people away. But that's it. And to me, it was just like, that can't be it. I mean, John and Terry don't have Cindy back. There's no closure for Joan about her murdered daughter, that one of the killers said she's dead. There's got to be something. And like I said, I'm not holding anything against Testa, the DA, too. He says, hey, I'll give you everything in the trial. You can have it. If you find something for me to prosecute, I'll prosecute. But I'm just telling you that nobody's doing anything. And that just drove me insane. And I just knew I had to keep looking and trying to find other victims. And yeah, over the next several years, before I knew it, I had potentially 100 victims that could be theirs.
Wow. 100?
Wow.
That's my number, is somewhere close to that. I know that sounds like a big number, too crazy, but if you break it down to the years and all the other details that happen. And again, my point to it is I don't really care if they killed all 100 or not. I just didn't want them to be left out like Joanne was. So let's put them all in a pile.
Yep.
Let's start solving these cases. If one of them turns out to be somebody else, hey, So what? At least it got solved. Because, the problem, and Laura can confirm this, problem with cold cases is departments just don't have the budgets, and they're just not getting worked like they should.
No, and they're usually, I mean, we were just with her up in San Francisco, and she met with the cold case unit up in San Francisco PD, and, they reached out to her to find some information because they knew she was talking to some of the serial killers, and they gave her a boatload of case files, and all those guys in the cold case place are all retired cops. They're all retired homicides. So they don't have the resources that they need in order to deal with these cold cases. So it's fantastic, like people like yourself and Laura, who are not forgetting the victims and who are very determined to find resolution for these families.
So, Rob, when you first met with Sherman Tyne about these cases, what were you hoping to get from him? Did you think he was going to give you any information, or?
Well, I guess I had, but I keep kind of backing up, and I'm trying to keep it, short because, like I said, it's been 25 years of my life.
That's
so
okay. That's all right. We got nothing but time here.
Okay. I'm just trying to make it make sense, if you will.
Sure.
Back in 2000, just before the trial, John, Cindy's dad, had put out a reward for anybody to have information on Cindy. It was $20,000. So Sherman Tyne saw that in the media and approached the media and said, hey, have that guy give me the 20 grand and I'll tell you where Lauren put her body. Of course, John, victim's dad's going crazy. He's not going to pay one of the two killers. He's pissed off, everything. So again, Leonard, Leonard, love him, but he loves being controversial too. And so
Leonard's the PI you're working with, right?
Leonard was a bounty hunter.
Oh, and a bounty hunter. Sorry. It was someone you were working with.
Yeah, I'm sorry. He got me into bounty hunting, and he's the one that I worked with him for years and years. We did all the bounty hunting shows on TV and stuff. And he's the one that got us into the Casey Anthony. So, again, being dramatic, he goes to the media and he says, tell that guy in prison, I'll give him 20 grand if he tells me where the body is. So that starts a big fight between the victim's family and Leonard, and I'm trying to keep them calm of just, let Leonard do his stuff. Sometimes he's just crazy. He's never going to pay him, but he's just going to throw it out there. Let's see where it goes. The goal is to find your daughter, period. Mm-hmm. And so that's I had to tell that part to make sense, because fast forward now to 2010, Lauren's getting paroled, and it's back in the news. Here's Sherman Tyne, his buddy, sitting on death row. Lauren's getting paroled, getting to be free. He has to spend 2 years in a county somewhere during his parole. It's very strict parole. It's on ankle monitor. He has to be in the place overnight. Can only go out in the morning, has to be back at noon, and they can go out in the afternoon. So this is all over the media because nobody wants it. Nobody wants a serial killer in their county. Long story short of that, he gets paroled to the other side of the fence up in Susanville. So the same prison he was in is still on prison property, but he's technically out of prison because he's paroled to the other side of the fence to a trailer. And he has to sit in that trailer for 2 years. Meanwhile, there's just a lot of media going on about the whole story. A reporter that was really involved in this story back in Stockton, where this mainly was focused, reached out to a bunch of death row inmates looking for a story. Of course, Sherman Tyne writes him back. And in their conversation, he says, hey, 10 years ago, there was this cowboy-looking guy that offered money for bodies. Would you reach out to him and see if that's still on the table? The reporter calls Leonard calls me. We sit down. We have this big meeting of, okay, and of course Leonard's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get back on front of the news, whatever. Let's get it going. So Sherman Tyne calls, and we're just all in this group conversation of, well, what's your thoughts? What's the plan? And he says, well, I've got $15,000 in restitution against me. And I hate that because when a fan, because all these guys have groupies and fans, as we all know, and they send me $1, I only get 50 cents. I want the whole dollar.
Wow.
But if you guys take care of that 15 grand, I'll give you bodies. So, well, what are you talking about? And he says, well, I'll give you a Chevy, I'll give you Cindy, I'll give you a well with 25 bodies, I'll give you another well with 10 bodies, and then we'll talk about the rest later.
Wow.
So
what was your reaction to that?
Well, to us, we're thinking 15 grand for 37 families getting closure. It's a great deal.
No, I know, but just initially,
time,
just the reaction of the amount of bodies he was talking about.
Well, yeah, it's a little bit of a shock, but again, remember, I've been doing that for 10 years, and I'm thinking it could be 100. So I'm not really taken back by the number. It's just you got to also understand it was very controversial. Like, we took a lot of heat for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people hated us. And I get that. I get the controversy. I get the fact that you don't want to set a precedence to pay a bad person to get the answers. I get that.
Yeah.
But in bounty hunting, I mean, we call it a snitch fee. You pay the brother to snitch off his brother. Give him a couple $100 and he snitches off the brother. It makes our job easier.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
it's done in law enforcement too. They do it all the time in law enforcement too.
right.
In order to get, they pay informants. They keep them on payroll. They cut deals with bad guys to get a bigger bad guy. So I don't see what the difference is.
No, I get it. I mean, like I say, I understood both sides. You got John, who doesn't want to see a penny going to the guy that killed his daughter, and I totally get that. And nothing bad to victims, but the way we rationalize it in our own minds is that it's all based on emotion. If you go to a victim's family, like if I went to John and asked him, "Hey, what would you give to get your daughter back?" His obvious answer would be everything I own, $1 million, whatever I could scrape together. I mean, that's every victim's family's answer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they don't want somebody else, the bad guy, to get that money. So I get it. Our idea is, look, we're kind of like the brokers. We're not emotionally invested. We'll just pay these guys for the info, and we'll get closure, and we'll get it quick. And that was the whole concept. But like I said, it was pretty another whole experience.
Oh my God!
With all this stuff.
Pandemonium, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, because it actually got us on Anderson Cooper because of that, and of course, like I said, everybody's just hating on us for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. I mean, like I said, I get you don't want to make a precedent. You got Son of Sound law that they're not supposed to make money. I get that, but at the same time, like you said, it's acceptable to get to that answer, to get to that. And who else are you going to get that answer from other than the person involved?
Exactly.
Quickly. So that's how it started. That went for the next 2 years. Sherman was kind of nervous about getting ripped off, as he should have been. So he wasn't really giving clues that anybody could follow. It's kind of like, oh, she's buried 6 foot behind this tree on my property. And I'm kind of like, okay, dude, there's a lot of trees on your property. So could you narrow it down? And we're just going back and forth. And
he was playing games.
And yeah, and he's drawing these maps, and he wasn't very good at drawing. So they're just like, like a kindergartner. And we're going back and forth with all that for 2 years. And Leonard got bored with it. He said, let's just be done. He's not going to give us anything. Let's just be done. And I was never going to let it go, but that was my end. You asked the question how I kind of got in with him. That was basically it, because I did a lot of letters, a lot of phone calls, just going back and forth trying to figure out these maps of where these potential people were. And after the 2 years go by, Leonard wants to pull out, just forget it, and let's just see what he does. So he says, we're taking the money off the table. Nobody's going to do anything, have at it. And he says, well, what if we do a little 50-50, meaning that I'll give you Cindy and Chevy and you pay the money, clear my restitution, and then we'll do the wells. So we agree to that. And mainly because, now we're in 2012.
Yep.
Back in 98, I promised John I would find his daughter. And now it's 2012, all this time. I really wanted Cindy. So we agree to that. So then he gets very detailed, draws a map, and that kind of turns into a little fiasco too, because we actually go to the wrong spot first. Really no fault to anybody other than the fact that his memory is from when he was there in 98 compared to now it's 2012. And things have changed, the terrain's changed a little bit. And so we actually went to the wrong spot first, which then kind of made us think he was lying again, because it just wasn't making sense. And so we had a little fumble there. I guess the next big event is I had located a composite that looked like Lauren. And for some reason, I just thought it resembled him, what I thought. And so I looked into it. It was the missing Michaela Garrett, a 9-year-old out of Hayward. Now, when I first saw it, I didn't think that was right. I just thought it was too young for him. But, Joanne is 15. She looked about 12. Michaela could have maybe passed for 12. I'm on Anderson Cooper's show. Wes's sister Dolly was on there with us, and she admitted on the show that Lauren raped her when she was 12. So, I got 3 blonde girls, about 12. I don't know, maybe. So I got Sherman with it. Sherman says, yeah, he did kill that little girl, that he wasn't involved. That Lauren was visiting his sister at the time. So I look up his sister. His sister lives 3 miles from where she was taken. It's like just all fitting.
Yeah.
So in January of 2012, Now Lauren's going to get out of that trailer in August. He's ready to walk out in August.
Yeah, I was wondering
So just before.
I mean, because the news was talking about Shermantine willing to give up information for money, and so I'm sure he's hearing about it, Lauren.
Well, making it worse, in the first part of January, we decided to get Lauren's number and kind of harass him. He's got a phone in his trailer. So we called his phone, and Leonard was just jamming him on, hey, yeah, your buddy's giving us everything, where you put Cindy, where you put Chevy, where you put the wells with, the wells with 25 bodies, the well with 10 bodies. Like, he's giving us the details. Yeah, you might have a little problem in August. And he was just throwing that out there to see if it would make Lauren react, cut his ankle monitor, take off, do whatever, because he did kind of have free reign other than ankle monitor. So nothing happened. A couple of days later is when I discovered this other possible case, confirm it with Shermantine. And so then Leonard's like, let's jam him on it. So we call him back. And Leonard can be pretty relentless. He's kind of like a Nancy Grace, and he's like, man, dude, you're done now. Your buddy confirmed you killed this little girl. You're out visiting your sister, and it's going to get real hot for you. In fact, I might need to send you a lawyer if you want to talk to somebody, because I can almost guarantee you're not getting out in August now. It's going to get super hot for you. And Laura was really quiet on the phone. He says, I got to go. Like, he killed himself right after that phone call. So At that point, we thought we were golden, that, everything's on the money from what Shermantine's telling us. I mean, here he confirmed what we thought. We present it to Lauren. Lauren takes himself out within the next couple hours. Basically, he hung himself off the back of the trailer. CDC didn't find out till after midnight that night, when his ankle monitor wasn't being charged, and it started alarming. So they went out and found him dead. So now we're thinking, wow, this might all be true. Like, basically Shermantine's given us real good information. I got approached by a dog handler just because we've been in the media, and he'd had successes with his dog. And I said, yeah, that would really help, because I got some pretty good locations, but need something to confirm it. And so we made a day early February, made a plan, and we took Cindy's dad and we basically took him to his daughter, right where Shermantine said. Now, when I say we took him there, he didn't do a recovery. We didn't do anything like that. It was just the dog alerting, us all knowing that, hey, everything's making sense. She's here. Because part of the problem, too, that, I don't know if I want to get into this, but there was some issues with law enforcement with the current administration at the time, and some things that had happened along this path of investigation that we were kind of questioning the agency that was in charge. And so we just weren't really sure how to handle it at that point. Not being law enforcement, we can't do a remains recovery.
Yep.
Because none of us out there were sworn.
Exactly. So you had to call the law enforcement to do it.
And we had concerns about that. So we weren't really sure what to do at that moment. I mean, we just had a great location of possibly Cindy. Then we went onto the property where he said Chevy was, got the dog hit there too. So we're like, okay, we got Cindy and Chevy now. This is perfect. But now what?
Mm-hmm.
And again, so much stuff is going on at this moment in time. Lauren had just killed himself. Everybody in the world, because of Leonard going on media, that everybody knew we were on the phone right before it happened. So you've got the agency kind of not investigating us, but like almost, I'd say, wanting to beat us to the punch. Like, we know that all correspondence is looked at. We know that phone calls are listened to. But I mean, this was like immediately. Like, if Shermantine had called us, they immediately got that recording, listened to it, see if there was any details. Letters were being intercepted and actually sent to the agency instead of us. Like, if I sent a letter to the prison, it would go to the agency. If he sent a letter out, it would go to the agency. We figured out it was about 5 days, and then they would forward them on, because they were just trying to get to the point before we did. So, and that's what happened, which I don't care. I mean, great, recover the bodies. We can't do it anyway. But Shermantine didn't see the recovery from us on his local news station, because he does have a TV in his cell. So he wrote a very detailed letter based off our conversations that the sheriff's department then intercepted and went out and recovered Cindy. I called the Wheelers, Chevy's parents. They live in Tennessee now. I called Paula, her mom, and I told her, I said, hey, we got her finally. And I mean, she was screaming. She was so happy.
Wow.
I mean, to the point where I was like, Paula, you understand she's not with us. And she says, oh, no. We mourned that she was deceased years ago. We just wanted to live long enough to bring her home. That's all we cared about.
Yeah.
So she was excited. Valentine's Day of 2012, coincidentally, Valentine's Day, Vander Heiden's got victim notification from the agency, as well as the Wheelers in Tennessee, that both Cindy and Chevy had been recovered.
How did that feel for you?
I think for me, I would have to say that's my biggest life achievement. Like, if I don't do anything else, I think I'd be happy. I mean, getting Cindy home after 14 years, and then Chevy after 26 years. Chevy was missing for 26 years before she got home. And currently she's on the mantle back with the Wheelers in Tennessee.
Wow. Hey, Laura, I just want to chime you in here real quick. When you heard that story, I mean, it kind of mirrors everything, the work that you're doing, both you and Rob. And what was that like to hear a victory like that from the work that those guys did in order to get that information?
It gives me hope, for my victims, Cindy and Andrea and the other unknowns. It's a huge victory. And I think I'd feel the same way. Like, if I didn't do anything else with my life, at least I did that and helped the victims' families. It's a huge deal, to bring that closure to the families.
Yeah. I don't understand why there isn't a government body, law enforcement agency that can kind of follow up on these things when you realize, like, you're just recently a victim of, like I was saying before, is that I don't understand why government agencies, law enforcement, don't have some sort of organization or body of their. I know they're stretched thin, but when you realize how the families really need this, and like Gary Ridgway's, one of his victims, Green River Killer, was just ID'd through DNA that they found some remains, and the mother, the family they were elated even after all these years. Just to know where their loved ones are now, that they can have some sort of, not closure, because you never have closure from this, but at least a resolution and an answer to a question of where they are. So I put it both to you, Laura and Rob. This kind of validates to what you guys are doing, which is God's work, because it's not like you guys are making money doing this. I know you're not, and it's a quest. So how do you?
I was just going to say on that, I think that's what you have in cold case teams, across the country, is you have detectives that get emotionally invested in these cases, especially on the homicide level. They want to have a success. They want to catch a bad guy. They want to give some resolution to that family. And, they spend their career and have a lot of successes. And then when they retire, those are usually the guys that are coming back, offering a day or a couple days a week to try to get closure, because it is such a great thing. It's just, you're right, the government doesn't fund it. And I think that's why Laura and I hit it off, because we knew exactly what we're talking about, exactly the feelings behind it. And I don't think a lot of people see that. You see a little blurb on the news of a family upset that they have someone missing, but you don't see the day-to-day that we both experience talking to victims' families. It's an emotional toll, and I think there's a lot of great detectives out there that go through it. But more, I think now, I'm retired, I was good at it then, so let me go back and give a few hours, a week to help. But you're right, it's not enough. There's so many cases out there.
And I don't, just for people, our audience and our listeners to understand, I don't think they understand what the grind is that you guys go through. I mean, we see it from Laura, because we've been dealing with Laura for almost, how long now?
Over 2 years.
Almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
And we know that whenever we're with her, her phone's blowing up. And it's either victim's family, or it's more than likely a serial killer who she's working. And you did, Rob, immense work with the Shermantine case, and you're still doing it. And, we were up at San Quentin this weekend. I got a bird's eye view, or first person view, because I was able to go into the cage with Laura, just for David Carpenter, and spent, I don't know, how long were you in there for? Like 2.5 hours maybe with him?
Yeah.
But, and is that kind of the average amount of time you spend in a cage with someone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get 2.5 to 5 hours.
2.5 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
But just sitting there listening to this serial killer talk and spew his dialogue and his story and his version of what happened. And what Laura has to do is the tactical empathy, where she's listening to him, she's sharing stories about her life just to get him to share stories about his life, in hopes that and they're going to open up. And she takes an enormous amount of work to break these killers down to where they either trust you or they just don't care anymore, and they just want to give the information up because they want to please both you, Laura, and Rob. And so it's like, I don't think people understand how hard that is, and how, when you walk out of there, I mean, I know, Laura, you're exhausted. I mean, I was exhausted after that day, just to being in there in that cramped, like 6x4 cage, and you're not just independent cages, they're all kind of jumbled together, and you're right next to another person, offender, visiting with their family member or girlfriend or whatever, groupie or whatever it is. It's just bizarre, but at the same point, you guys are really doing God's work, because like we said before, and especially in San Quentin, is that they're moving all those guys, and who knows what's going to happen to them after they move them to General Pop, and whether or not they're all got targets on their back because they're high profile people, and we know that that's an attraction for people inside prison to get credentials, get cred from taking out a famous serial killer. So all this information can just go away. So I don't think people understand how important that is.
I was just going to add to that, and I think that we both face the time clock. You've got crimes, especially when you have cold case, you've got crimes that happened years ago. So you've not only got the potential of you're in on the information, that person, something happening to them, but it's also a race for the victims' families. I mean, I've had victims' families members pass away and not getting that answer yet because we're still plugging along. So It's like a constant race to try to beat the clock for both sides, get the information as well as satisfy some resolution from the families. And, I think Laura could probably, or maybe already has spoke to this, the emotional part is for us that we go through is that it's kind of a big game of getting that trust, deciding what is truthful and what's not truthful. How are we going to play this or talk to them to try to get what we want? At the same time, a lot of serial killers are intelligent. I mean, they play the game just as well. There's a reason people in prison are called cons, because they con. And so they have their own dynamics in their structured environment that you have to kind of get through. And it's just, sometimes it can be draining, between the victims' families and the ongoing dealing with them.
So, all right, well, let's bring it up to date, because you were up there this weekend when we were up there visiting with Shermantine. What is your goal now? What are you still trying to get? Is there more bodies that he needs to tell you where they are?
Yeah. There's a lot more bodies still to go. The one in particular that I'm working right at the moment is that, as I started earlier, where I said we're going to pile them all in the pile, and if they go a different direction, they go a different direction. They're all equal. Nobody's more important than the other, but just
Correct.
One that we were focusing on kind of took a left turn to somebody else, but it's somebody in his circle of people. And I'm confident that I know who killed the individual, and it wasn't him. So the biggest problem when you have that scenario is that it doesn't matter who they are, nobody's going to be a snitch in prison. They just can't, because that.
So is there somebody on the outside that he knows that hasn't been caught yet?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so someone's active out there.
Yeah, and I don't believe they're doing anything currently. It's just it was two people, they were brothers. One committed suicide right after the incident happened of the other person because of that. So I think the other one knows, and I was trying to get information from Shermantine on it
How does he know about
he
it?
thinks.
How does he know?
Because they actually went and hid at his house right after the murder was committed.
Got it.
And like I say, they're all connected. They're all friends.
Okay. And did those people, that other group, did they know what Lauren and Shermantine were doing?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
And
so it was like
I'm sure they were part of,
it was
part of the group.
Okay, so it was a killing club.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, that is kind of a side story to this, or another, I don't know if you want to say rabbit hole, but he's always said there was 7 of them involved. There was 7 people killing people the entire time, and he's told me straight to my face over and over that he will never tell me who they are. And I call him out on it all the time. I say, I don't even believe you. I said, you got you 2, anybody more than you two that even knew something about this would have already said something on accident to a girl when they're drinking, something. I mean, so I think you're full of it. And he swears there always was this 7. And at the time he told me 1 was dead. So now with Lauren being dead, that would mean there was 5. And I think I know, including him, that of 2 more, but there's still 2 unknowns. If that's still
Yeah.
a good
At this
number.
point, though, I mean, he's never going to see the light of day. You know, what does he have to lose?
I think with him, so he's got a couple things. Number one, when he gave up the wells and the and Cindy and Chevy, in one of the wells, that's a whole other little side story that I can tell you about the well. But one of the victims was a mixed race female, and so when that came out in the media, because she's never been ID'd still, when that came out in the media, there was a certain group in prison that put a hit on Sherman. He had to actually be rolled up in solitary because he had a hit on because it was said that he killed a mixed race female. So that's an issue. The bigger issue that I think's on his mind is if there's truth to this group that's still somehow out and about, he does have a fear of his kids, because that is one thing he told me. He said that if any of the people talk,
oh, so he has kids on the outside. Shermantine has kids on the outside.
Yeah, he has a ex-wife, 2 boys, coincidentally, that are half a mile from where I'm sitting right in my office.
Wow.
They live just across the tracks here where I live.
Do you talk to them at all?
The one I did, I haven't met Wes Jr. yet. I'm supposed to here pretty soon, but the younger son I did, because of course he got into trouble, ended up being the bail bond, so I helped facilitate that as kind of a friendship thing for Shermantine and take care of his kid. And so yeah, I know his young son not well, but I see him all.
Tell us what Shermantine's like what kind of personality. Like, I got to see a little bit up close with the Carpenter, and I've interviewed other serial killers as well, but both you and Laura have such a rare, intimate look at these serial killers. So describe his personality. What's he like when you were in the cage with him?
I think what always kind of shocked me is how well they can appear normal to a point. I mean, you have some that are obvious. There's some problems with them, and there's obvious issues that person has. But like Shermantine, for example, is, I would say, to a point, pretty normal. I mean, I've talked about this before to my friends that you just have a conversation with your friend for a little bit, hanging out, and then you think back and you go, man, that same conversation happened in that cage. About the weather, about what's on sports, what's in the news, with no real obvious signs. This guy killed 30, 40, 50, 100, who knows, people. Like, there was nothing that jumped out. He doesn't have serial killer on his forehead. He doesn't have crazy beady eyes. And it's not until you get in certain topics or certain discussions that you see, ooh, like I've only seen him snap one time where I could really say that, wow, I could see where, based off his size and his temper, he could cause some damage. He could really flip if he snapped. If that switch flipped, I could see where he could be a bad guy. But in a regular just interaction, it's not that bad. So to me, it's intriguing, because how many killers do you walk by daily that you have no idea?
Oh, yeah. In plain sight.
Yeah.
I mean, they just kind of blend in. Those are the real successful ones, the ones that are the family men, the BTKs, the Green River Killer.
Ridgeway. Yeah.
I mean, they just lived, among us, and, they would kill, and then, like, Gary Ridgway would open Christmas presents with his entire family and then go for a drive, in between that and dinner, and then go rape and kill a woman and then come back,
Right, and I think that's what really intrigues me, because, same with Shermantine, he had a wife, 2 kids, step kid, he was working, but he had extracurricular activities that no one knew about.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, that fascinates me, and I'm sure Laura too, is just like how these people can be in and around us, and no one knows until it's too late.
And how do they disguise it from their families? Like, where did he say he was going when he was doing this stuff to his family? Am I going hunting and fishing? I'm going out drinking with Lauren?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Laura, what do you think about all this as far as what Rob has shared with you? I mean, because I'm sure you guys have had long conversations about comparing notes, because you're in a unique fraternity.
It really is. It is wild. Yeah. What he's saying is so true. They're very unassuming, these guys. And you can be sitting there having a normal conversation. You wouldn't think serial killer at all. But then sometimes there comes a point where you'll see them snap, or you'll see their temper, or just some aspect of that come out of them. And I talked about it on a few episodes ago where I saw Bidekers jump out of nowhere. And it was scary, when you finally see that serial killer emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because a couple of times I had visited with, there was a person in legislation that I'm sure it's out there as far as who it was or whatever, but we'd gone together, and she was a female, and part of her interest was her cousin went missing in 81. And so there was a potential, just because of the area and circumstances, that it could be them. So that intrigued her. And so she had kind of a pen pal relationship with him, and then had seen him a couple of times. Then we started going together, just trying to see how that would work, playing off each other with him. And the difference in how he responded to her and dealt with her, and then how he dealt with me separately, was kind of a problem for him when we both showed up together. And what amazed me is when we got out of the interview out in the parking lot, we're talking, and she looks at me and she goes, "Do you think really because okay, let me just back up for a second. Shermantown was always considered the worst of the two, of Lauren and Wes, and that he was the more violent. He was the one with the temper. Lauren was kind of the pretty 80s rocker guy that got the girls interested, and then, the animal came out type thing." But she turns to me and she goes, "Do you really think that everybody got it wrong? That Wes is really the nice guy? And like, maybe he didn't do these things?" And I just looked at her, I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me? That's the game. I mean, come on. Did he really just get you?"
Yeah, that's
and
scary.
That's how good they are.
That's
how good they are.
They're manipulators.
So when you met Laura, what did you think about what she was doing, Rob?
I thought it was amazing. I thought, I actually was a little jealous, because I was like, "You mean you got it in 5 years and I'm at 20 when we met, I think, or whatever it was?" I'm like, oh my gosh. But yours died, so I got to give, anyway.
Yeah.
No, I just thought that.
Are you referring to the fact that she got information from Lawrence Bittaker in 5 years and it took you 20 years from Shermantown? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, that hers was over in 5 years and she had great successes.
Got it.
I mean, I guess I got mine. Actually, I guess I got mine, if I really think. I actually got mine in 2 years, actually. I just thought about that. Because I started in 2010 when we started talking about where they were, and we got them in 2012. So it wasn't that bad. But I don't know. It just made me laugh that I was like, man, you were in and out in 5 years and had huge success. And I'm 20 years, and I'm like, man, I'm getting tired,
Yeah.
I never feel like, it's over, though. I feel like it just keeps going because you're just still working the case.
Well, exactly, too. And, you've got bodies that still find,
right.
Her remains. And, I jam Shermantown all the time, like right before COVID, I said, like, dude, it's funny. I'll never forget. I visited him in February before they shut the state down. And it was 2020. COVID hadn't come out yet. And I was just like, man, dude, this is it. This is the year. We're doing it all this year because I'm getting tired. And he looks at me as a joke, kind of like, what do you mean? I've been sitting here for 20 years. I know what it's like. I'm like, yeah, me too. So what are we going to do? Let's get this thing done. And then, of course, COVID hit, screwed it all up.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, do you think he's going to give you the information that you want, Rob? I mean, you've been talking to him for so long. How does that feel when you're consistently interacting with a person like this? It's always interesting to me how you guys do this because it's so much work and you're just so driven.
Well, I think we probably both accept it's a slow process. I think that's where a lot of times things fail if you go too fast. It is a slow process. There is a give and take. And I think that my problem with him is up until this possible move, which may help us a little bit, but he wants us to go as long as he's alive.
Sure.
He's got nowhere else to go.
He's got nowhere else to go, and you're a companion now.
Yeah. I told him this last time. I said, who saw you on Christmas? Who saw you on your birthday? And nobody else. So, But at the same time, he wants that next year too, because he's got nowhere to go.
Exactly. How much do you think, Rob, the fact that Laura is a woman, is that an advantage for her, or is it a disadvantage?
I think it's both. I really think it's both. I think it's huge. I think it's huge because he's a female and these guys obviously like females and feel comfortable. I think, and I'm not saying anything against Laura, I think she's smart enough to get the difference. But I think a typical, and again, I know, I'm trying to think ahead of what I say. I'm not trying to sound bad of females, but I'm just saying that these guys, I think we know that they all like to be dominant. They like to control. And I can see basically how they were able to do what they wanted to get done. done. So the disadvantage is that they can play onto that. They can think that she's just some dumb girl coming in here and I'm the superior one and I'm gonna steer this how this is gonna go. I don't think they realize that Laura has the knowledge to kind of steer it back in the right direction.
Oh, she does.
So that's
We've
what I'm
seen
saying.
it.
I think
We've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great both. You know what I mean? It's a disadvantage and an advantage.
And plus the fact
You
all these serial killers all have very screwed up mother issues as well. I think that the maternal, I mean, because Laura's in there. I mean, like I said, it's like we like to say that tactical empathy. I mean, she's there. She's a good listener. She engages with them. I mean, I think the whole time. I said more things to Carpenter than you did. You just sat there and listened, and I think that is because you get these guys. This is their time to talk. This is their time to interact, to get something either off their chest or tell their story or engage their ego. And I think what Laura provides is that both sympathetic ear, but also plus the fact that, all these guys, victims, a lot of them were women. Majority of them were women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, she's kind of like a Trojan horse in a way.
Yeah, I would say that.
So, Laura, were you speaking with Shermantine? And can we just clarify how you met Rob and how you connected with him?
Yeah, I was speaking to Shermantine and he had mentioned Rob and I had reached out and we had met for dinner and we hit it off and then we started going to San Quentin at the same time and just hitting East Block, together ever since.
Yeah.
And
well, it's got to be good for you to have someone that's doing what you're doing that you can actually compare notes with.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It is. And I'll go to him for advice. I'm having trouble with this one or this one's doing that. And, we know how San Quentin works. We know how, because death row is like its own other world, you're in, and to have somebody you can go to for advice and guidance and kind of like help you kind of work these offenders. It's great.
Yeah, it's the worst episode of Melrose Place in there. It's
a soap opera.
It is
a
a soap opera.
opera.
Based upon what you tell me, and we had Mark on the podcast who's housed in death row as well, and he's just telling us, there's a lot of dynamics there. You have these super ego serial killers and the groups and the sects that they hang out in, the different groups and like cliques and stuff like that, and who hangs out with who. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
And how you guys have been able to navigate it all.
Yeah,
because there's definitely a hierarchy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and they all know Rob and I on death row. I think we keep that prison yard gossip going strong.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem. Based upon just the interactions that I saw with you with the other killers, Laura, and what you've told us and the recordings and the video chats that we've seen you in, there's a respect for who you are, and it sounds like Rob, like Shermantine, respects you, otherwise he wouldn't bother even seeing you.
I would say, Wesley is very, very dedicated to Rob. Every time I talk to him, he's actually like a faithful, like anytime I'm talking about the case or something, he's like, well, did you run this past Rob? And I'm like, yes, I've run this past Rob. And then he's transferring prisons to 10 minutes away from you.
Yeah.
You can see, I would say your dynamic with Wes was mine with like Larry. There's like that bond. It's almost like unbreakable because they really like imprint on you, and it's like they just want to stick with you for life. And that's how you get them to give up this information, is once you break through and they really do just like imprint on you.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get that information.
Yeah. But at what point do you have to stop all this? Once you get, when do you, either one of you, on this question for either one, when do you realize it's just like, this is a dead end? They're just choking our chains just because they want us to come and, buy me food and, and I have to buy them food and I have to, do things for them on the outside and all that kind of stuff. It's like, when do you guys have to just say, put your foot down and say, all right, enough with the carrot. Here's the stick.
Well, I think I would say it's probably harder for you, Rob, because what I do with that, because I have so many serial killers on the row. So for me, I put them in, competition with one another. So if they're going to play games, guess what? I'm not seeing you. I'm going with another one who's going to sit down and work,
Yep. Don't waste my time.
Yeah,
I'm going to go talk to someone else.
Right.
And I do that on a singular kind of platform.
Yeah.
Because I've told her, because like, since everybody knows everybody now through this thing, sometimes I'll get fed up. He's just running me in circles and I just get fed up and I'm just like, I'm just not going to talk to him. I won't take his call. I won't go see him. I won't do anything. And then he'll call and cry to her like, hey, have you heard from Rob? Can you talk to him?
He calls me and he's like, I can't get a hold of Rob. And then I'll text him and he'll be like, he's on timeout.
Yeah.
And he knows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's games. In fact, I just had that I was just talking today even to a Marin detective that I met through one of his victims that's possibly one of theirs. And he had heard that when the cold case team in the originating county did a shakedown on his cell. It's been about a year, but he just heard about it. And I said, well, I'll tell you the story on that. Basically, they tried to go pulled to talk to him. And I get it. I mean, it's the new cold case team. These guys, half of them weren't even alive when they were killing people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're reading and trying to understand. And then they just hit him up. And he said, well, you got to go talk to Rob first.
Yeah.
Before you come talk to me. And of course, you can't tell homicide cops that or cold case cops that. So they basically said, forget that. So they did a full search of his cell and pissed him off. Just like he was on the phone with me seconds afterward. He found out. And I just asked him, I said, well, you got anything to worry about? And he said, no, absolutely not. But that is so disrespectful. I will never talk to them.
Yeah.
Because of that. And it was just, it's things like that you got to be careful how you play hardball with someone that knows how to play hardball.
How much harder can he not play? He's in death row. He knows how to play hardball better than anybody.
Right. Yeah. And he just can't, he could just not talk, which, you don't always need that, but that is really the easiest way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are going for the easiest target, really.
Absolutely.
It's just a hard target to get to.
Well, I'm glad you guys are working together. I'm glad that you guys have each other to compare notes and
support each other through it, because it's not easy what you guys are doing.
Yeah. And then also, Rob, I mean, we'd love to have you, work with us when Laura gets, because we have some places we have to search down here. And, we've been slowly putting together a team of people that we can trust. We've done this before with former FBI agents and CSI techs and stuff like that and cadaver dogs. But I think we're getting, as soon as we get close to doing that, would you be interested in joining us on this expedition?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, like I said, you asked when we're ever going to stop, and I don't know. For me, I hate to say it's a hobby, but I don't think there's a point where I ever want to stop, because that closure's always new for someone else, and it just seems to, like Laura said, never end. One leads to another, and it just keeps going.
Well, it's a worthy quest. And also, I think it's for both of you, just listening to you guys talk to each other when we're up in San Quentin, it's like in your DNA now. It's like it's reflexive. It's a muscle memory for you guys. So you guys really don't know how to, because you're so ingrained into these cases and these stories and these serial killers and trying to figure out, all right, what can I do next to get him to reveal another piece of information? It's hard to walk away from that.
It is, especially when you're getting results.
Exactly.
It's like, oh my God, I'm actually getting results. And how can I, you just want to keep going, because not many people, almost nobody can do this type of work and get this close to, serial killers and get them to open up, and how you realize how many victims are out there, and it's scary, and you're like, oh my God. So it's almost like Rob said, you just don't want to stop, because there's just so many unsolved cases out there.
And the byproduct of this is you're creating so much data that hopefully this data can be used to learn how to prevent things like this for people in the future. And then it also learning how their minds work when it does happen in the future. You already have diagrams in your head and scenarios on where to look, how it was done. So you can literally, they're creating blueprints for you in the future.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things too, because I've had people, my own friends and stuff, get irritated or whatever. They're like, why did you waste your Sunday going down there to talk to somebody that doesn't need to really have the time of day from anybody? Why are you taking that time out of your life? I think the bottom line that people forget as time goes on in a case is that we're the voice of the victim. The victim no longer has a voice. And when that stops, that case stops as well. And if you're not constantly out there for the victim, it'll never get solved.
Well, I think this is a great place to end.
Yeah. Thank you both so much.
Yep. And then I'm going to stop. So thank you both. But if you want to just stay on for a second, I'm going to stop recording because I have a couple other off podcast questions for you.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.